Somewhere around 45,000 years ago, two completely different species of human beings ran into each other for the first time. We don't know exactly what happened in that moment. Nobody wrote it down, there were no witnesses, but we know what happened eventually because scientists found the evidence in our DNA. And when they published it, a lot of people didn't want to believe it. Because it turns out the reason you exist isn't some clean story about the strongest species winning. It's weirder than that, it's messier than that. It involves three separate human species, thousands of years of very questionable decision-making, and a cave in Siberia that contains more drama per square meter than anywhere else on Earth. Let's meet the cast. Around 400,000 years ago, early humans split into two groups. One stayed in Africa, that's us eventually, Homo sapiens. The other group spread into Eurasia and then split again. The ones who went west into Europe became Neanderthals. The ones who went east, deep into Asia, became something we didn't even know existed until 2010. We call them Denisovans. The only reason we know they existed at all is because a little girl died in a cave in Siberia around 50,000 years ago and left behind one finger bone. Not a skull, not a skeleton, but a finger bone, the size of your thumbnail. From that single fragment, scientists reconstructed an entire human species. Their genome, their geographic range, their biology, all of it, from one tiny piece of a dead girl's hand. Now, the Neanderthals are a completely different story. The more we've actually learned about them, the more that old image falls apart. You know the one, brutish, stupid, just grunting around in caves. That's not what was going on at all. Their brains were slightly bigger than ours on average. They controlled fire. They had this whole tool-making technique called the Levallois method where you had to plan ahead, shape the stone core first, and finish it later. Not exactly something an idiot does. On top of that, burials, cave art, jewelry, almost certainly some kind of language. These were not idiots. These were people. What they didn't have was numbers. Neanderthal populations were tiny. Little scattered groups all over Europe and Western Asia, completely cut off from each other by ice and mountains for tens of thousands of years. Their bodies were honestly incredible. Shorter limbs so they didn't lose heat. Huge nasal cavities to warm up freezing air before it hit their lungs. Their bones were so thick and dense that it's pretty obvious these people spent their whole lives doing physical work that would absolutely destroy a modern human in about a week. They were perfectly built for exactly the world they were living in, which was kind of the problem. Because somewhere around 45,000 years ago, we showed up, Homo sapiens. We didn't just trickle in, we came in waves. We had trade networks stretching huge distances. We could eat pretty much anything. Our bodies were lighter so we could move further, faster. We just kept coming. More and more of us pushing further into a continent that Neanderthals had literally lived on for hundreds of thousands of years. The neighbors showed up, and they never left. Now here's the part that apparently nobody wanted to hear. Scientists had to publish actual peer-reviewed papers about this because people just refused to believe it. They had children together. Not once. It happened over and over again. Thousands of years, different places all across Eurasia. Some of those kids made it, had their own kids, and that line never stopped. It just kept going until it reached you. Every single person alive today who has any ancestry from outside Africa is walking around with Neanderthal DNA in their body right now. Between 1% and 4% of your genome didn't come from Africa. It came from something with a completely different skull shape that died out 40,000 years ago. You are literally measurably part Neanderthal. This is where it gets weird. Denisova Cave in Siberia is literally the only place on Earth where we know for a fact that all three human species were in the same spot. What did we actually find in there? We found a finger bone, a few teeth, and some skull bits. That's it. That's the entire physical record of a whole human species. But then their DNA started turning up everywhere. A jaw in Tibet, 160,000 years old, rib bone from the same Tibetan cave, somewhere between 32,000 and 48,000 years old, and some tooth in Laos. Then in 2025, someone pulls a jawbone off the actual floor of the Taiwan Strait, and it comes back as Denisovan. So this species we know almost nothing about, turns out they were everywhere, in Siberia, Tibet, the tropics, the bottom of the sea near Taiwan, all over Asia, and just like the Neanderthals, they also had kids with us. Twice. Two totally separate situations, different parts of Asia, probably centuries apart from each other. But this is the one that actually broke some people. They called it Denisova 11, just a fancy name for an inch of bone pulled out of that same cave in 2012. When they ran the DNA, the results made no sense at first. The mother was a Neanderthal, not even from around there. She was genetically closer to Neanderthals from Western Europe, meaning she had walked thousands of miles east at some point before ending up in that cave and dying there. The father was a Denisovan, but the father already had Neanderthal ancestry in his own family, going back somewhere between 300 and 600 generations. So this girl, this 1 inch of bone in a cave in Siberia, was already the product of at least two completely separate times these species had mixed. Her dad's side had already done this before she was even born. These weren't accidents. This was just life. A world where the line between human species was so blurry that you could walk over a hill, find something that looked almost like you, and apparently sometimes just start a family. So what actually happened to them? Neanderthals were gone by around 40,000 years ago. Denisovans around the same time, maybe a little later. Nobody totally agrees on why. Maybe it was the climate change, maybe competition for food, maybe disease. We probably brought stuff with us from Africa that their immune systems had never seen before. Probably all of it at once, honestly. But here's the theory that actually makes the most sense. There was no dramatic wipeout, no final battle. Just wave after wave of us slowly mixing with fewer and fewer Neanderthals over tens of thousands of years until at some point there were no pure Neanderthals left. Their lineage didn't end, it just got absorbed into ours. They didn't die, they just became us. And the reason we know that isn't just theory. It's sitting inside your body right now. Neanderthal DNA is still actively influencing how you function, how fast your metabolism runs, how your immune system responds to certain infections, the shape of your nose. During COVID, researchers found that a specific stretch of Neanderthal DNA carried by roughly half of all people in Eurasia reduced the risk of needing intensive care by around 22%. Something that entered our gene pool 50,000 years ago was quietly protecting people from a disease that didn't exist until 2019. The Denisovans left something behind too. If you have ancestry from Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea, or Aboriginal Australia, you're carrying their DNA right now. And those Sherpas and Tibetans who live and work at altitudes that would leave most people completely gasping, that's a Denisovan gene. Inherited roughly 40,000 years ago from a species we only know existed because of a single finger bone, and it's still keeping people alive on the roof of the world today. Look, the story we usually tell about human history is this clean, straight line. Primitive to modern, one species wins, everything else loses, survival of the fittest and all that. But that's not what happened. What actually happened was three completely separate versions of human beings, developing on different continents, in different climates, for hundreds of thousands of years. Then they found each other, and instead of just fighting or walking away, they had kids together, across species lines, for thousands of years. The Neanderthals didn't disappear. The Denisovans didn't disappear. Right now, in 8 billion living people, they are still here. In immune systems, in how we process food, in the shape of people's noses, in the gene that lets certain people breathe at 15,000 feet like it's nothing. The most successful species in the history of Earth didn't get here by being the toughest or the smartest. It got here by absorbing everyone else. You're not the winner of some ancient competition, you're a merger. 3 human species walked into history, only one came out the other side, but it was carrying pieces of all 3. That's it for today. Now go to sleep. Your Neanderthal DNA is tired.